is simply a change of governance, a change of leadership, a change of system. So there are causes to that change of system. They are the reason why people can cry for change in any country. You get the sense? So when you talk about the French Revolution, personally, I'm trying to be egoistic. Personally, there are about 7 principal causes of the French Revolution. There are about 7 principal causes of the French Revolution, and I would like to list them. Then I will try to explain them and their interconnectedness and their correlation thereof. Number 1, we have what we call the system of ancient regime. Right. 2, the incompetency of the king. Number 3, we have what we call the influence of Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette was the wife to the king. Influence of Marie Antoinette. Right? We also have what we call the American War of Independence. Right? Number 5, we have what we call the bankruptcy of the crown. We have what we call the bankruptcy of the crown. Number 6, we have what we call influence of philosophers. Influence of philosophers. Then, number 7, we have the poor harvest. They were experienced around 1877 to 1879, because the revolution broke around 1879. That's when the revolution broke out. So there was the system of ancient regime. Like the system itself in the country was a recipe for a change. Because if we look at the social structure of France at that time, it was divided into 3 estates. There was the first estate, there was the second estate, then there was the third estate. You get the sense? That alone, that division in the country, was a recipe for a future dispute. Because the third estate members were the poorest, but they used to pay taxes which were enjoyed, or which were just misused by the first and the second estate. So the first estate mainly was the most privileged group. It was the one which included the aristocracy and the clergy. When I'm talking about the aristocracy, I'm talking about the king, his family, and his folks. They enjoyed the biggest share of the cake, while the third estate members, and most of them were in the rurals, worked for them. They paid tax. There was salt tax. There was poor tax. There was what they call vindictiemi, gabel tax. There was a list of taxes which they paid to the first estate. As the leadership, it failed to change everything in the country. They failed to change the lives of the people, but they just feasted on those taxes which were paid by the third estate members. So that was the structure of the French nation. So it was also a monarchy. So it was a kingdom. In a kingdom, the king calls the shots. No one disagrees with what the king said. So under this system of ancient regime, the king controlled everything in France. He had the final say on everything. And the worst part of it is there wasn't a parliament in France. So it was an absolute dictatorship. Because the duty of a parliament is to take into consideration the views of the people and put them into law. You get the sense? But it wasn't the case in what? It wasn't the case in France, because the king controlled everything with his own people. There wasn't any parliament. There was even what they call the letters de cachet. The letters de cachet means imprisonment without trial. If you are seen criticizing the king, you are just thrown in jail without even going through the court processes, without being fairly charged. You get the sense? So that was the bad side of the ancient regime. They controlled everything. The king, the power was centralized on the king, and he didn't have any checks and balances. You get the sense? So the people revolted against that system of ancient regime and its royal absolutism. Then number two, that is one of the most important cause of the revolution. So it's 1789. 1789. The French Revolution was 1777 to 1789. It was 1887, but 1777 to 1789. Sorry, I've corrected that one. So there was the incompetence of the king. Right. When the revolution broke out in 1789, the king who was reigning at that time was called Louis XVI. Louis XVI. Right. The revolution broke out at his time because he was incompetent. When we say someone is incompetent, we are simply trying to say he's not fit for the job. But this incompetence was so up there. Why am I saying it was so up there? Because Louis XVI was working under a system which was already there. There were also his predecessors, Louis XV, Louis XIV. The system was already bad before Louis XVI came into power. But the revolution happened during the time of Louis XVI. The people revolted during the time of Louis XVI. Why? Because of his incompetence. And you find out that most of the causes that I'll try to explain here were linked to Louis XVI. That's why I say that I can explain these causes of revolution. You can take 2 weeks to explain each and every one of them, but it takes me 20 minutes. Because I can deal with Louis XVI here and try to explain how he's directly linked to the other causes of the what? Of the revolution. Right. Louis XVI was incompetent in the sense that, number one, he succumbed to the influence of Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette was a extravagant queen. Dennis Richards, according to Dennis Richards, he had about 500 pairs of shoes while these people were suffering. They were always dining and doing some parties at the Tuileries Palace. And Louis XVI allowed all that. And it further depleted the French coffers. Because according to, I love Dennis Richards, according to Dennis Richards again, they gobbled about a 12th of the country's revenue. Right. So he succumbed to the influence of his wife, Louis XVI, and he was a political flip-flopper. Like, he was not consistent with this decision making. Like when he hired and fired Tegot and Necker were economists who were there, with whom he employed so that he can normalize the economy. But after the pressure from the clergy and his wife, he went on with firing them. You get the sense? And it further plunged France into economic quagmires. And what next? Even if you talk about the American War of Independence, he endorsed it. He endorsed the American War of Independence. He even got some debt to fund it, while the country was reeling in a comatose economy. And you know what? This American War of Independence had a two-pronged effect in as much as the French Revolution was concerned. Number one, the French volunteers, led by Lafayette, who went to America, saw the revolution happening with their own eyes in America. So they came back to France pregnant with the revolutionary ideas. And they also began to spread those revolutionary ideas to the French people. And number two, it fled the French coffers dry. Because it was money, there were funds that were used to fund this American War of Independence. Until the country was now lying on its stomach. Something like that. So this exposes the incompetence of the king. So it also led to this to the bankruptcy of the crown. It was led by the decisions which Louis XVI and the first state members did. Like they gobbled all the French coffers, poor decision making, and misuse of national funds as well, as it is seen in the American War of Independence, and also leading to to the bankruptcy of the crown. So this gave the philosophers something to say. The philosophers were thinkers. They operated under a period of what we call enlightenment. Because what happens is when someone is reeling in poverty, sometimes munhu akanyatsorohwa nesituation yakaoma anogumisira kujairira situation iyoyo zvekuti anopesira kuiona kunga iri normal. Kunotozoda umwe munhu wekunze kukuvhura pfungwa. That was the situation in France. When the people were suffering in France, they couldn't see it. Up until these philosophers came through and wrote some plays, wrote some poems, wrote some novels, which were tailored to open the minds of the what? Of the people, so that they can revolt and see the wrongs which were being done by the government. So they opened the can of worms, they revealed the debt that was under the carpet, they exposed all the shenanigans of the government, they exposed the rotten everything. And this what? This opened the mind of the French people, and they got this revolutionary spirit that subsequently leading to the French Revolution. So we have Jean-Jacques Rousseau, we have Voltaire, we have Montesquieu, and some encyclopedists who were the people who wrote and criticized the government, thereby opening the minds of the people. You get the sense? So under Louis XVI and the Haitian regime, I think I have explained much about the influence of Marie Antoinette, American and North independence, their links, how they are linked, the bankers of the crown, the influence of philosophers, and even lastly, the poor harvest. You get the sense? The poor harvest became the immediate cause of the war because they led to that rural to urban drift. Like people now, most people lived in the third district members lived in the rural areas. So they were poor harvest and they couldn't get anything from their land. So they engaged in what we call a rural to urban migration and formed what we call Paris mobs. So it was now a ticking time bomb. And we can also blame Louis XVI again for failing to deal with the situation. Because when you are a leader in a country, you are like a father, you get the sense. A father doesn't work with excuses. Vana vakati vari kuda chingwa kana waizoziva kuti iwe in 6 months time waizoshaya mari yekutenga chingwa unofanira kugara uinacho time yekuzoshayikwa isati yasvika. So Louis XVI can be blamed again for his failure to control the what? The situation in as much as the poor harvest are concerned. So, you know, when the people moved into Paris and formed those Paris mobs, it led to the revolution in the sense that the people were now there. Louis XVI failed to address the situation and the people rioted, they caused a lot of problems. And it also caused Louis XVI to convene the Eastern General 5 May 1789 because he had failed to control the situation. So that's it for the causes of